So many people did want this thing, that is, Christ killed. They wanted it done in a corner, so to speak. That was the attitude of Herod the Great. Herod the Great did not send his men to Bethlehem to bring all the little children, the baby boys under the age of 2, up to Jerusalem and have them slaughtered publicly. He said, now go there and just kill them. Just kill them. The people of Nazareth, they sought to push Jesus off a cliff in that small Galilean town. That would have been doing it in the corner. That wasn't in the capital city. And now, as we read in Matthew 26, these Jewish religious leaders wanted Christ's death done quietly. Not with a whole lot, not in the feast day, not so that everybody sees it. But God wanted it a public spectacle, both then and now, emblazoned. There he is on a tree. That's what God willed. So it was that Jesus did not die in Bethlehem. He was born in Bethlehem, according to the prophecy of Micah 5 verse 2, but he's not to die in Bethlehem. He was brought up in Nazareth to fulfill another prophecy from Isaiah, that light would shine in Naphtali and Zebulun, but he mustn't die there. He has to die in Jerusalem, the capital city. And not just at any old time, but during a festival, Passover, intimately connected with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when the city is packed. And this fact that Christ's suffering was public is indicated in that line in our Apostles' Creed. He suffered under Pontius Pilate. That makes it public. He had a public trial. He had a public scourging. And anybody who didn't see that scourging could see the effects of that scourging later on when he carried the cross or when he was hanging on the tree. And he most certainly had a public crucifixion. Which brings us to the third point. Christ's suffering under Pontius Pilate not only indicates that his sufferings were both historical and public, it also points to the method of execution, crucifixion. And you will know that the preferred method of the executing of criminals in the Old Testament amongst the Jews was stoning. Stoning. That's how Naboth was put to death in 1 Kings 21. On trumped up charges, then they had him stoned, even in the northern kingdom. They didn't give a hoot for the law, but they still stoned Naboth. In the New Testament, that was how Stephen was brought to breathe out his last. They beat him with stones until the blood flowed, his ribs and bodily parts were mangled. He died, but he saw Jesus stooping down to receive him. The Romans didn't stone, the Romans crucified you. They stretched out your hands and drove them into wood, nails, and pinned your feet to the vertical bar. This form of death is slower, it's more painful, and it's certainly more visible. See, the crucified person is hung up between heaven and earth. And the idea is something like this, that he's rejected by both. He's not good enough for heaven. Heaven despises him, looks down, glowers at him, and the earth, it's not fit for this man to touch it. He must be suspended up there, so he's rejected by all worlds. And Jesus spoke time and time again in his ministry of the way in which he was going to be put to death. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. And he was lifted up from the earth when he was nailed to the cross, and it was pushed into a hole in the ground. John 3 verse 14, Christ here draws a historical parallel. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, high so that everyone could see, and those who saw were healed, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. Suffered under Pontius Pilate. Pilate being a Roman governor means crucifixion. And it had to be crucifixion because crucifixion, unlike other means of execution, fits with the prophecies of the Old Testament. If you have your Bible, you'd be best to turn to Psalm 22, verse 14. We're going to read a few verses there, and then later Psalm 69 and Isaiah 53. Psalm 22, verse 14. Christ is here speaking as he sings the Psalms. Psalm 22, verse 14. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. Think now of him hanging on the cross. My heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. Difficulty in breathing. The body has its bones dislocated by the heaving up and down. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaveth to my jaws. And thou hast brought me into the dust of death, thirsty, painful way to die. For dogs have compassed me, the assembly of the wicked have enclosed me, and that refers to the crucifiers of Christ and his enemies around him on the cross, mocking him. They pierced my hands and my feet. You don't do that with stoning. You don't do that by shooting someone. You don't do that by killing them with a sword. But you do that by crucifixion. Piercing my hands, both of them, and my feet, both of them. I may tell or count all my bones. They look and stare upon me, do my bones. They part my garments among them and cast lots upon my vesture. A man on the cross doesn't need clothes, and these are given as booty to the executioners. Be not far from me, Lord. I need your help. And then paging over to Psalm 69, verse 21. I'm only picking a few passages now, you understand. Psalm 69, verse 21. They gave me also gall for my meat, and in my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. It's a thirsty form of death in the blazing sun, in the heat of the day, and it's a form of execution that has you ask for a drink. That was the normal way. Christ asked for and received such a drink on the cross. We could go through the whole of Isaiah 53, but that's too lengthy, so I'll pick just a couple of verses. Isaiah 53, verse 5. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was pierced through for our transgressions. He was bruised or crushed for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes, think of the scourging now, we are healed. Verse 8, he was taken from prison and from judgment. A judicial process involved. And who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. He died. For the transgression of my people was he stricken, and he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. That's the form of his burial, after he was pierced and crushed on the cross after judicial process. There we have it. Question and answer 39 of the Heidelberg Catechism asks this question: is there anything more in his being crucified than if he had died some other death? Why crucified? What's the significance there?